Hey, girl.
Yeah.
He's got a building that he wrote on. And there's like 2 or 3 other kind of potential things that he's interested in.
She's not gonna allow me not to.
Potentially getting.
You know what I mean?
involved
Yeah,
in.
sure.
So-
She'll be perfect.
All right, let's get the meeting
Hi.
started.
How are ya?
Oh, Kevin, look, you're in the front row. I'm like, nobody ever says
For
this.
that.
Actually does feel like different. I'm not sure if I like it yet. We're gonna try it on. All right, let's start with bucket fills and something good. What do we got? I know we got a lot of stuff. Where's Alex?
She's on Zoom.
Oh, she's on Zoom. I know we've got some good things that happened this week.
Derek is the king of mindset. And like, a
Whoa.
mindset. Like a month and a half ago, I was supposed to do a 6-mile run or something, and I didn't do
Oh, I
it.
did see that.
And Derek said, I ran part of it, then I finished it, whatever. I said, oh, I don't like to run or something. And he said, well, I used to run it. I had a mantra. So my mantra or my, what is it called? Not mantra.
His affirmation.
Affirmation.
Yeah.
Affirmation was, I am a runner and I finish well. So I ran my second half marathon this week. And
Awesome.
Did he finish?
Well,
I finished
You
well.
finished well. Finished well.
He said he was going to.
All right, what else we got? Chris?
I've been getting up and exercising in the morning. I was on a bike ride a couple days ago, and this song came on. I was really it was great. It was a great song, and I sent it Derek because it's one of the artists that we enjoy. Derek, you gotta listen to this one. But I don't know, it's fun. So
And it rocked.
it was. Yeah, it's a brain melter. So
Awesome. Rick?
Subtronics.
Is
I'd
it
like
about
to-
Derek?
No, we're pumping Derek up.
See him rarely when he's here in some of the country. Love him though. So I wanted to thank my team for the last 5 days I was able to spend in our condo in Marco, because today is my wife and I's 25th wedding anniversary.
5 years, huh?
Bucket Phyllis Regina. I have no idea what she's been thinking for the last 24 years, but yeah, we were able to get together. So it's been awesome. So we had a really good, like a little mini vacation, and Sherry and Jordan just covered everything. I didn't have anything to worry about. So
Excellent.
Awesome.
Nice.
What else? What else we got? Alex?
All right. I had my first closing yesterday.
So, but you also are just hitting day 60 with your license, correct?
Yes, any day now is day 60.
So she's got her first closing in that first 60 days, which is super fun for her. So, all right, one more.
Thank you, Bucket Phil, for everybody who helped me along the way. Much appreciated.
Isn't this real estate easy?
Yeah.
I've got one for you, Katie, because this has been it's been an interesting transaction and a bit of a disaster. And I don't know what I would have been doing this whole time without you, so I appreciate it.
So it's interesting. I don't know if anybody saw my post yesterday, right? We talk about value, and we're gonna talk about value today of the real estate agent. And there's some people that probably don't have value, and there's others that do. But the particular transaction she's talking about, she stepped in on a Facebook message. It's like, hey, can someone show this property while I was gone in Guatemala? It ended up being difficult from that beginning until when we close, which we still don't know when that is. But you've been hit with everything you could potentially think about in this transaction, including, there's a unit that's not actually a unit, but the appraiser says it's a unit. And the mom's a lender then it got switched to the dad who's on the transaction. So you've learned a lot in this one.
My first one has been a doozy, so we're good.
Right, from here on.
Yeah.
Fun ride.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do want to add, Sherry and I want to add one for Alex Randall. How long has Alex been here? You know, about
3 years.
3 years. So this is a, this is a three-year veteran realtor, and he writes us, last Friday, hey, Rick and Sherry, I just figured I'd let you know that I have some clients that are closing next week on a place in Clearwater, and the sellers are planning on submitting an offer on your listing in Buffalo. Just,
Contingent, yeah.
yeah, just want, yeah, contingent upon this transaction that Alex is part of. Just wanted to let you make sure you know that they are absolutely solid. We're clear to close on the 30th with 0 issues whatsoever. Won't be any issues on the contingency on their offer for your listing. This isn't even, I mean, this is impressive that he knows there's a domino effect and he reaches out to the agents ahead saying, hey, you know, you would expect that from a lender, but from a realtor, I mean, that was very insightful. And so I called him and I'm like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah, this, you know, I just wanted to make sure you knew that this is no issue. So when they write on this, it's good to go. You know,
That's awesome.
that's impressive.
Yeah, really impressive. All right, moving on. So here's the May training calendar. We do have one more free CE tomorrow. So I know that there's a lot of people on the list that do not have their CE done yet. It's a 1 credit tomorrow, 11 to 12. So it's during our normal training times to get that in. Why not, right? Do we have the June calendar in here as well?
We do.
So we also have the June calendar. So it's kind of fun. So in June, we decided kind of as a leadership team, it was really, really fun to have Matt Strobel in and talk about new construction and different aspects of it. So we've added in on Thursdays a new construction series. So those are going to be off-site at different builders' locations, right? So you're going to be able to learn a little bit about different price points, different quality of builds, what that looks like, obviously, on a spec basis too, because I think it's really important to know, hey, here's the price point, but what do the specs look like for that? And what goes into that? Especially if you're going to be representing a buyer on the build side. If it's a larger big box builder, you absolutely can be a huge benefit to people, but you have to know what to look for in those situations. So that's going to be really fun. We've got next Tuesday, create your own presentation templates with Candy. So she's going to go through. There's been a lot of questions on, hey, I don't know how to put my listing presentation together or buyer presentation through designs. Bring your computer. It's going to be a workshop type setting. She's going to walk around and help you design those next Tuesday. We'll have our team meeting, Ask the Broker with Kevin on the 11th. Our next block party will be the 12th. And our R&R will be the 19th. And then on, oh, I didn't know that was the name of it. Are you on track with me? And we're going to go through 411s and just kind of where we're at tracking in Q2 as well and goal setting. And then what did you say with Kelly, which this is going to be an interesting one. I don't know how old everybody is or if you know all the right and wrong things to do on a text message. But you know, things like okay, period, I guess is rude. And so we're learning what to say when you're talking to different generations and, you know, is it a full sentence? Is it not a full sentence? So when you're talking to a client, you're not offending them in some way without knowing it. So this is actually going to be really interesting to go to. And
I need
then
to
our
go to
last,
that because many times I picked the wrong emoji.
yeah. I'm gonna learn like you can't do some of them, all right? So we're gonna find that out.
Very inappropriate.
You're like, you can't send that one, you can't send that one, John. So we've got some really great things in June, that'll be fun to, you know, apply to your business.
And we're just waiting on one last thing and then we'll send it out to you. It's just not quite ready to send out yet.
Oh, and we do have Leadership Academy on the 6th. So I think we have about 15 people. Yep, it's here. It's just our market center that Jake's doing it with. He did post yesterday on Facebook. So it's going to be a good one. It talks a little bit. It reminded me of actually the training with the Mr. Thank You that I was at. How you find gifts within different problems or situations that you might be in, and make sure that you find the silver lining. So that'll be the 6th, that'll be here, and it's a little bit longer of a training, so it's 11 to 12:30. But again, make sure to sign up so that he knows who's all coming.
I just realized there's a error on the calendar. The 19th we're closed. It's Juneteenth. So pretend you don't see that.
Which you'll forget anyways after I start talking about something. So
Are we gonna adjust the R&R then?
we will adjust that to probably the 26th. No, we can't. We'll talk about that after the team meeting. How about that? Okay. All right, block party today is put on by Profile. They might already be down there, like, stuff up. So right after the team meeting, come down there. It's fun. You can talk about what's going on in the market, introduce yourself to people you don't know. And are we having burgers? Brats. We're having brats and hot dogs today. So, right downstairs, kind of and around the corner by the white tent.
You can go out the back door and then just downstairs, there's a door that way, then you don't have to walk around everything.
Oh. You know, it took me a long time to even know that we had that
I didn't know
stairwell.
until last week.
Like, I always believe, all right.
Cause I park over there. You can't come up it.
Commission changes, so, I just we wanna remind you again. We talked about this last week, but if you aren't aware what Winmore is the system that, leadership uses in the back of the house to pay you. That is getting switched over to Command. So while that is happening between June 4th and June 10th, you will not be able to get paid. So if you have a closing, maybe the 2nd or the 3rd, make sure that we're on top of that, or you've let Heather or Lydia know, so they can get that out prior to June 4th. It's truly not as long as you think. I think it's only like 3 business days. And right away on the 10th, we'll be able to pay out those commissions again.
And you also cannot submit a commissions tab during this time. Submit your opportunities for review, that's compliance, it's completely different, but do not submit the commissions tabs during June 4th. Through the 10th or through the 9th?
Through the ninth, really.
It'll be live on the morning of June 10th. I don't know what time that's gonna be, if it's business hours of 9 or whatnot, but on the 10th, that'll be live again.
Good job, Linda.
Yeah, we know. She's real time changing it.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
So any questions, if you need anything, just let me know. The DAs will look a little different. That printed sheet that Lydia emails out to you and puts the
Well-
opportunity looks slightly different.
Wednesday, after it's redone, we will have kind of a tutorial that day in person. If you're on Zoom, you'll be able to see it as well, what that looks like and how to redo that for your commissions. And Heather will be showing you that on Wednesday, the 5th. No, Wednesday, the 12th. Yeah.
Right after, yep.
Yep.
That week of the June 9th and 10th.
Okay, so we talked about this a little bit last week. Bill Jones is now partnering with KW, which is a remarkable thing to have happen. Because if you go to any of Bill Jones' events or even webinars, they're quite a bit of money, right? And in person, you actually don't get much interaction with him. Through KW, they were doing a digital event. There's 2 different days, there's June 24th and June 27th. It is an all-day event. We suggest you signing up for this prior to at least a week beforehand, because they're sending out a workbook for you to work through during that session, right? So if you want to get the most out of that training, being able to write it down and do the exercises with him through the workbook will be really beneficial. And if you haven't read his book, it's essentially, I mean, this big, exactly what to say, right there, yeah. Exactly what to say. And there's one that's specific for real estate agents. So this training is specific to the real estate industry. Rick.
Well, Sherry and I attended this with,
Lisa Wells.
Wells, Lisa Wells, and this is one of he has to be in the top 3 speakers I've ever heard speak. Unbelievable. I mean, obviously he's speaking about how to communicate. And it is impressive. It doesn't matter if it's relationships or business or sales. The stuff that you'll learn in there about how to communicate is really, I mean, he's very, very.
He was a guest speaker. I don't know if it was Mega Camp or Family. It might have been Mega Camp. And he was the most captivating speaker that whole time. I mean, it is like, he just like can get your attention and you're like, tell me more, right? Which obviously, you know, hopefully he can teach you the same thing, but there's a reason. He uses his words wisely and he also uses, you know, different tonality. But I would highly recommend this particular class. Any questions around that?
Are you going to be showing it here?
We can't, so it's individual. We can't show it as a market center. What we can do is if you bought a ticket to it, we could potentially put it on, but we can't like live, we can't stream it if you haven't purchased your session.
How much are the tickets?
$99, and if you're a mastery client, I believe it's $199. I've heard a lot of sheesh, like, that's a lot of money, right? I think a lot of people think trainings are a lot of money, and it depends on what you're gonna put into it, right? I think yesterday I posted about there, price is what you pay and value is what you get. And a training like this, the value that you can take out of this is incredible. I mean, just from listening to him for a short time period, I flipped my script on recruiting immediately when I got home. Like thinking of, instead of then going at someone and saying, how, I'm just curious, how open-minded would you be to X, Y, Z, right? Nobody wants to say, no, I'm not open-minded. Nobody wants to say that. So they're like, well, I'm pretty open-minded. Like, how open-minded would you be to just see what your house is worth? No, not at all. That's a stupid idea, right? Nobody's gonna say that. Or maybe they do, and then you're like, next. Rick.
So the title here, exactly what to say, and it's the magic words for influence and impact. And I think the thing that it was most impressive is that here in the office, every so often you'll hear somebody like Copendrier who's been around forever, right? Or Derek or Kevin, or somebody will say, okay, this is what you say in this particular situation. Well, that's something that they've learned over 20 years. This is something where I took 11 pages of notes. I don't take notes. So, and I've been doing this for 25 years and I have a background in psychology. I learned so much from this guy in that amount of time that's being used to be more impactful in a very positive way, that it's amazing. So if you, instead of being in the business for 20 years, go to this training and learn the ways in which you can communicate that are influential. And it's extraordinary. So it's very,
It's also
very
not just
powerful.
business, like the way that you speak to your spouse and friends and partner and family and your kids. I've chosen different words since I've heard him and read the book on how I speak to my kids. Or, different ways to get them to potentially do something when I'm like, hey, do the dishes. And they're like, no. Right? So again, if anything, just invest in yourself, right? And invest in how you can build more relationships. All right, next. Mega Camp. Mega Camp is in August. We have a group going down there. That's also going to be incredibly fun. John and I are flying out on Sunday and be there till Wednesday. There's a CEO summit there. If you want to see actual situations and people that are by the book doing the MREA and doing it really well in different ways, whether or not it's cold calling, marketing, events, you name it, new construction, open houses, that's the place to see that. It's a place to rub shoulders with people that are doing the business really, really well. I know a lot of you have been there before. I think I've been probably 14 times now. It's a great event to just kind of kickstart your business during the fall time and get the motivation sometimes that you don't have after the summer. Let's be honest. Summer's fun. You go boating, kids are out of school, you do different things, you go up north, and all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, September I have 0 closings, right? That's not, doesn't happen like that. It's because we stop lead generating sometimes, and this is kind of the kickstart for October, November, December. This is you.
Yeah. So we are gonna start last year we had a drawing, we're gonna have a drawing again this year. So as you go on to check your CE transcript, if that column that has the arrow has all zeros, so you don't need anything, please email me and let me know that you are all set for the year, and we'll enter you into a drawing, and we'll start drawing Wednesdays in June. We're gonna have a couple of winners every week, so.
Oh man, I gotta get it done by next Wednesday to get in that drawing.
I guess you'll be in the next one, but you won't win next.
I think John's aware. I'm kind of like one people that you don't necessarily love. So don't follow in my footsteps.
And there's a handful of people who have already been renewed because they have all their stuff done. So thank you and awesome job.
Who already has all their CE done? Oh, wow, I'm impressed.
Uh-oh.
I mean, Tony started working on next year already, so there's that.
Here's the reality. If Tony's done, anyone could be done.
He's like, thank you, thank you. All right. Okay, so last week we talked about risk management. We were doing the listing side, right? We are still on the listing side because there was a lot of information that we went through last week. We ended at low offer is what we ended at. So we actually, next up is inspection. So I have my co-host today. Again, this is what you guys do during this to lower risk, right? So this is not like her and I teaching this particular situation. Everyone does business differently and different things come up at different times. So the inspection portion of this is probably going to be a lot, right? Because there's a lot that goes into the inspection. So to start, how do we prep our buyers on an inspection, and how do we prep the sellers on an inspection? This is focusing on sellers, but I just want to know, how do we go into that part of the transaction? Are we like, hey, it's inspection time, good luck? What do we do? Rick?
There's three important things that we're gonna be looking for in this inspection, three things that are
Is
expected.
this to your buyer or is
It
this to
is,
your?
you asked buyer first.
Okay, yep.
So. Is that too much? That was a little too intense. Yes, yes, it is.
All your intensity
I
always.
know, I
I
thought
will
you could
just-
handle it.
it's like-
It's for the buyer. So first thing that we're gonna look for is anything that is a hazard in the home, because those are gonna be most concerning to us.
Okay.
It's a hazard. That's number one. Number two that we're looking for are unanticipated, very expensive issues. So
What do you mean
unanticipated,
very expensive issues?
Well,
Because
for
expensive
example,
could mean different for different people, right?
Big
Like,
ticket item,
sure, yeah,
Was
so
it?
big ticket item.
basically anything over $5,000. So in other words, if we understand that the roof is 10 years old, but if we realize that within a year it needs to be replaced, that could be a $20,000 expense that we were not aware of. That would be an example. And number three is there's always going to be an expectation. You're buying a used house. There's an expectation that things that are supposed to function do function. So in other words, if a window doesn't operate at all, and when you bought the house, you had expected it to operate, that's something we might ask the seller for. Those are the three things that we're going to focus our attention on before we go into this inspection. Everything else is going to be informative for you and things that you can work on in the future.
okay, what else? What else do people, that's great. What else do people say? Is this kind of the protocol that we talk about to our buyers?
Structural concern as well, but that could be a big ticket item.
Yeah, we say it's like, this is the opportunity to learn as much as you possibly can. And then go into the whole, we're looking for big ticket items that we were unaware of during the showing, and then health and safety issues, whether that's radon or whatever it might be, that we were also unaware.
Okay, how great is this? Right? Like, hey, you know what? This is an opportunity to learn about the house that you're purchasing. How many of you, when you go buy a car, they're like, hey, we're gonna go through this and we're gonna teach you how to do the, everything in it. You go into a rental car. This is me. I go into a rental car and I'm like, where's the blinker? Which one is the windshield wiper? I'm so confused. Where are the lights? Right? So this gives that, no, am I the only one that does that? Like, I only know my car and then I'm like freaked out and like, the lights on. I don't know where to turn them on. Right? And now that,
Yeah, why-
shifters in different places and you move it weird,
I still don't
So-
trust auto lights. I still turn them on.
it's always very, very stressful. So when you set it up as an opportunity to learn, what do you think their mindset is? Because the word inspection is like, I'm gonna inspect things, and in my opinion, when I think of inspecting, it's like, I'm gonna find everything that's wrong. Right? Is that what you guys think of when you think of inspection?
Kind of prepping them to like nicely say that you don't know everything about homes, right? Like you're learning, opportunity to learn something you don't know.
Yep. It sets a mindset for them.
I think it sets them up to be open-minded, that there are things that are not going to be perfect and that they will, that's part of home ownership and that's part of the process.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we always say it doesn't matter if it's a 1 day old or 100 years old, you're gonna get a very lengthy report. It's gonna look like the house is crumbling. We like say all those things, but then we also, I always like remind them when we meet outside, I'm like, this is about to take 45 minutes, and that's okay to do the recap. Like, it's not, you know, like don't panic when we're still in here for 40 minutes pointing at any nook and cranny because that's the inspector job is to find anything.
And think of, like, put yourself in their shoes, right? Maybe they have never purchased a house, maybe they've never, purchased in the last 7 years. Think about the seller. You live in a house until there's something wrong, usually the seller does nothing about it, right? Like, how many of us change our filters on a regular basis?
Everyone?
I don't believe that that's true, right? And do you get your AC and your furnace, is it serviced every single year? No, but as a real estate agent, I go in and I'm like, they should have had this furnace, serviced every year. I'm like, I don't either, right?
You guys hear what this very intelligent young lady said, which was probably most significant? 45-minute recap. She didn't say we're gonna follow the inspector around for the 4 hours that the inspector is there and overwhelm you as Mr. and Mrs. Buyer and frustrate the inspector for the fact that you're standing there next to the inspector for the entire time. So this is highly encouraged to not attend a full inspection. I don't know how to say it any more black and white than just don't do it because it's gonna open a can of worms.
Well, it's gonna take longer for the inspector. They're gonna probably miss things because you're talking to them or this is the time that they do their job, right? Okay,
There's two words that were said. One was unknown and the other one was unanticipated. I think you don't have to write unanticipated. That's why I started with
I was
unknown.
like, really?
But-
You know me in spelling and you're gonna make me write that?
But I think having that conversation with your client of, hey, we knew about the roof. So you're not asking for a new roof, because the seller's gonna respond, unless something's different than something is unanticipated that was in that. I think that's a big part of number 2 is we've learned something new that we didn't know on the first time. It's not just we're renegotiating our whole contract.
Yeah, because Kevin may have already taken into consideration when discussing with his client what price to offer based on the condition of the home. Because he's an experienced realtor and they identified stuff already, so playing fair is important.
So this is what we say to our buyers, okay? So let's go back to that. We were talking about risk management on the sell side. So buyers are hopefully, which we can't control the buyer going into our listings or how they're set up for this inspection.
When did we say that to our buyers?
Great question, Derek. When do we say that to our buyers?
At the council and.
I would say multiple times, actually. So at the consultation, as you're teaching them about the process, would be a great time to start talking about this.
When we're writing the purchase agreement.
Yep.
Getting ready.
And then right before we go into that 45-minute time period, like, hey, just remember, these are the 3 things that we're really looking for in the negotiations, right? Because if you've been in the business for a while, I remember inspection reports being like 3 pages long, and you're like, what? That's like 45 things to do on this house, right? Then we went to 0 inspections. And anyone that's been in the business for like 4 years or less have no idea what inspection like requests used to look like. They were insane. Were they not? Anyone in the business remember? Like, it was like paragraphs of things to get hit. Just because we were trying to sell the house that's been on the market for 180 days to 200 days. Okay, so this is what we say to the buyer. What do we say to the seller as the inspection is happening, as we prep them when we do the listing? What do we say to them?
I think it's important to let them know what an inspection could include, chimney, radon, sewer scopes, all of those things, so that they know how many people are going to be in and out of their house.
Well, I think that's a huge one. How many inspections? Because how many times do you get one request? It's the general inspector. Then you get another request, and then you get another request, and it's like 3 to 5 inspectors coming in, and the seller freaks out. How many inspections are they doing? Do they need all of this? What's going on? If you don't tell them that, right?
Amy, can I ask your expert a question then along these lines specifically? So Jelena, you had mentioned, foundation. So could we role play? I'll be your buyer.
Sure.
Okay, so you mentioned that, mold would potentially be an issue and foundations, structural issues could be a problem. So should we be inspecting the foundation right now? in the beginning here with our inspector? And should we also do an air quality test to make sure that there's no mold in the house?
So first of all, mold can grow anywhere, and that's all about the condition of the house. If a house is dry and is able to have air moved around, then mold can be cleaned out and mitigated. I think at this point, we should wait for the inspector and decide what he comes back with, and then we can go from there. Our inspection period lasts another couple of days, and if we need to extend, we can do that as well.
Okay, so there you go. The key is stay focused on what the primary inspection is. If your inspector is good, the inspector will identify whether there's a potential mold issue, a potential water intrusion issue, a potential foundation issue. That's when you can say, okay, let's do a secondary inspection. At that point, you're not freaking out the seller either. And you're saying, hey, seller, we identified an issue with potential water intrusion on the stucco of your house. We're gonna have an expert come out and do an intrusive test. Is that appropriate?
So I think that this could get even more detailed, right? And this is about knowing your client. Because air quality could be for multiple different reasons. It could be what they found in a general inspection, or it could be someone in the family or the household has allergies or something else that it's very highly, like it's sensitive. And I think when that's the case, right? I've been in transactions where it's like the air quality is bad and there's mold or this, and this. What's important about that to your buyer, right? Because it can be mitigated, but if you're going to try to go up and negotiate against someone when their child has severe allergies to something, the seller or you are never going to win in that situation, right? Like you have to be able to understand why the inspections are happening too. So I'm like, you might want to ask the question of, you know, when you said
Right.
mold can grow anywhere, tell me a little bit more, what's important about that concern to you, right? Like, well, it's mold. Okay, great. If it's just as simple as that, or it's, hey, we've got this allergy, and this allergy, and I'm concerned about it.
And I would be careful anytime to direct someone around inspection or not inspection. As much as providing.
Is this
It's-
broker hat or? is
Yes,
it
because it
agent hat?
says
Okay.
right on our thing, right? It says, we're not experts in any of this area. So I think it's important to recognize we can help along the way. If that's important to you, what would you like to do is a good question. You know, I'm not telling you ever not to get an inspection of that further things. Here's an opportunity that we might have to do it later. I think is kind of the point that you were getting at. But maybe let's spend the $400 versus spending the $1,500 on the whole thing. Yeah, that might be able to save you. What would you like to do? All of that.
Well, and obviously, if there's structural issues that you're finding when you're going in the first place, you're probably gonna bring an expert in on the front end versus the back end, just so that way they know what they're getting into versus spending extra money, so.
The worst thing would be for us to go, oh, that's simple, we see it a lot, they can get dealt with, and then it can't be.
Right.
And now my realtor told me that this is no problem.
It goes back to asking questions, right? It goes back to understanding the reason and the motivation that they want anything, whether or not it's buying the house, whether or not it's the inspection, whether it's not they want to negotiate 50 grand off of it. What's the motivation on why they're asking that? If we don't get really good at asking questions, that's where we get into a really hard position, right? Because we're assuming we know why, or we just don't know how to ask, because then it's like, well, what if they say that this is a deal breaker? Well, then it's a deal breaker. It's their purchase, not ours.
You're really concerned about liability. We just normally just say, this is what our broker, Kevin.
Here's his number too, if you want to give him a call.
John
He's
just
free
sitting
at
over
all
there.
time period.
John just sitting over there going, I'm sure glad I had Kevin do that.
No, it's not John Butler anymore.
All right.
Seller.
Well, I think this, and this piece of it too, right? Here's what you can do. You get to choose which inspections.
One of the things I tell my seller upfront when we're doing our listing or our presentation is to say, hey, you're probably gonna get an inspection, and oftentimes those can be up to a couple $1,000 just on radon or whatever. And also, I prep them at that, and I also tell them, it's almost always cheaper to have it done, the work done by a person that you choose than the person that the buyer is gonna choose. So makes sense before we go on the market to do some of the easy corrections that you know.
Guys, I'm just excited that we're talking about inspections. There were like multiple years that we didn't even have any, and you think about those home buyers right now and all the things they did not find that is costing them a ton of money. Like, this is it's not a new topic, but it's a new topic. Like, it's a different market that this is actually happening.
So, something else that we like to talk to the sellers about, just to prepare them, is say, you know, we know you've owned this house for 10 years. When you bought it, we did an inspection, and there were certain things the seller took care of. There are other things that you guys said you take care of over the years. You've also made some improvements, so you know the condition of your house better than anybody else does. So when the time comes, if there's something new that shows up that you didn't know about, we'll talk about that. But I'm sure you do know that there's certain things that might come up, and just prepare yourself for those. Because you could have either spent the money in the last 10 years fixing them, or now you're in a position where you may spend the money now. Either way, you're gonna spend the money, so I just wanna make sure that you guys are thinking about all of those items.
Okay, so would I say that you guys prepped the sellers even prior to inspection to fix the items that would come up in an inspection? So would it be worth maybe having a sheet to your seller of the things that come up in an inspection? If that's, I mean, how many times does backflow preventer come up?
Often.
I feel like 95% of the TISH reports are point of sale, and everyone's like, what's that? Nobody knows what that is. Like, like sellers don't know what that is, right? But maybe this is a thing where you say, hey, Mr. Seller, here's a list of everything that comes up on an inspection normally. Have we done any of this? Have you cleaned your chimney lately? Have you had it inspected? You know what I mean? All of those things, because to Kevin's point, you have someone come in and they do the chimney inspection, that you are not getting away less than 10 grand for that, right? Because it's like, well, either I need a liner or I need, chimney, like brickwork done. And that's like, cha-ching, 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 cha-ching. Fix it.
Also, from a budget standpoint, a lot of sellers will ask, what should we anticipate? And carefully, it's not, we have to be careful how we say this. We would say it is not uncommon to expect that there will be requests that would add up to about 1% of the total value of your home. So just keep that in mind. And other agents who've been doing this for a long time, let me know if you think that's relatively accurate, because if you got $500,000 house, something up to $5 grand in added up request is not out of reason in general. $1 million house, you're looking at more like 10 grand, so.
I mean,
at
honestly,
least you're
think about
setting
the
the
services,
stage.
like servicing your furnace, servicing the AC, getting your chimney cleaned, getting out, or having your main line cleaned. Those alone will cost your seller $1,500 to $2 grand, right? Right away, they're gonna have to do it anyways. I mean, they'll come in and they're like, oh, well, the main line, you have to clean it because we have to come back and re-inspect it. Happens all the time. I worked in Minneapolis, and it happened literally most of the time, right? Just have it done. Have it done prior to. You've got the records, you can show them, and you know what you're getting yourself into. Okay, what else do we say to our seller? Pre-inspection or during inspection time period, or prepping them for inspection? Nothing?
Some cities around the lake, at least that I know, are requiring a sewer inspection now.
Yep.
So that's something that wasn't common before, at least.
So the other part is know the required inspections, right? Whether or not there's a point of sale, whether or not there's a well inspection, that know what city that you're working in and what's required for them to do in the first place.
Yeah, Golden Valley, you cannot sell a house without a wastewater line inspection. Because what they're trying to do is, instead of them collecting the tax like every other city and taking care of the lines from the house to the street, they're having the homeowners be responsible for that whole project. And it's about a 50-50 chance that your homeowner will be responsible for at least lining that. And that's a $6,000 to $10,000 project.
Golden Valley, Orno, and Tonka Bay.
Orno and Tonka Bay.
Tonka Bay and Orno are all.
I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so this is just prepping them. So when the inspection comes in, what do we do for risk management to not let the deal fall apart? Colleen.
I usually start with
Okay, you know that this inspection is your 5-year to-do list. You're talking to the buyers. Yep.
Oh. Sorry. Okay, we're talking sell side, listing side. That's awesome. I'm just not gonna put that one on the, listing side, seller. What do we do to mitigate risk when the inspection happens?
Before, when you get I'm assuming you're talking about once we get the request from the buyer's
Yeah.
agent that you've got 11 things to potentially address here to
Yeah.
move forward. Well, the first thing we do before we do anything is go to our subcontractors and vendors and price that stuff out for our clients. Because the last thing you want to do is outline 11 things and the sellers have no idea how much that stuff costs. Of course, they don't know how much it costs. They didn't do the work. Right? They didn't fix this, they didn't fix that. So at least come up with a rough estimate for them value wise. And when it lands at $7,000, well, you know what? We did talk about the expectation that it might be around 500,000, 1% of your $500,000 house. We're not that far off. So let's negotiate.
Okay, so let me ask you. Inspection comes in, you look at the list, you immediately call your vendors, your
Yes.
subcontractors.
If we don't know already, but yes, then we would, if we don't know a price on something or a rough estimate, and we're gonna
Okay.
do 400 to 600, right? We're gonna do
Like a range.
a range.
Okay, what else? There's another party in this transaction, right? So when that comes in and you have a long list, what do? Do you sit there and stare at it? Do you maybe call the agent and ask, what is most important in this list? And tell me, because number one, as a buyer's agent, do not ever send over the inspection report to a listing agent, ever. Do not ever do that unless it is requested. Do you want to know why? Why, Kevin?
Well, you can make an argument that all becomes material fact.
So you send that over, whether they open it or not, you've now sent it, and how do you prove whether or not they've opened that email, right? And all of a sudden, here's the list, here's the inspection, and they're like, well, you have to disclose all this. And there's agents that do this, right? Where they're like, now you know all this, so if this doesn't work, you need to disclose this in your next transaction, right? If this cancels. Do you? But just don't do it. Don't do that.
So why?
And not inspectors aren't always.
What do you mean?
Why would you, if you're the buyer's, if you're the buyer's agent, it's, to me, what you just said is, yeah, that's to my advantage.
Do you ever want to work with that listing agent again? Cause I would be like.
Buyer's agent.
Buyer's agent. No, I'm saying though, as a listing agent, knowing that you're gonna like throw this at, you know what I mean? Like, you need to have some sort of like,
And
you know what I mean?
also remember that, the agent doesn't own that inspection report. That belongs to the buyer or whoever paid for it. So if you sent it over and the buyer didn't want you to, you're sharing confidential stuff. So be careful sending things that are not in that.
In addition, buyer's agents, please do not send over request without backup information that's legitimate. In other words, when you send the request, make sure that you're snipping the note from the inspector and a photo that relates to it, because you're not the expert, regardless how long you've been in the business, how many homes you've built and all of that stuff. You're not the expert, the inspector is. Put the onus of responsibility on that inspector and what they are saying is an issue. So when we send the request, if there's 8 requests, there's gonna be 8 photos with just those notes related to those requests specifically. That takes a huge responsibility off the listing agent too, because the listing agent doesn't have to explain, hey, this is the inspector said he found this in this area of your home. I have no idea
It's
what they're
the
talking
eve on
about.
the southeast corner and they're like,
What?
which corner, right?
Yeah.
Where you can like see the picture and it's.
And it's
there.
highly probable
Yeah.
these sellers have not seen some of this stuff. They haven't seen that there's, wires hanging down in their utility room above the furnace, because they don't look above the furnace in the
They
utility.
they just live in the home, right?
Yeah.
You're living in the home. What else? What else for the sellers? I mean, it can be overwhelming to be like, okay, now you've got a request of all of these things to do, right? They just prepped their home. I just staged it, we painted, we did all this stuff, and now they're asking us to do all of these things. Eric.
I think time is really valuable, so don't save the inspection report or like the inspection request for like the 6 day of a 7 day period. because when the seller receives that information, they need time to process it. And the 7 stages of grief include shock, denial, anger, bargaining.
Look that up today.
Because it's true, having been there, that happens. And
Well, you're living this right now in some of your properties and you're
on
like,
day, on hour 6, I'm still in, anger. Thinking about bargaining. And when I wake up like the day after, or maybe the day after that, then maybe I'm at acceptance, and it doesn't happen if I have like 5 hours to respond. I'm only in shock and probably anger.
and to that point, right, that inspection comes in. If you've ever been a seller, right, or you've seen the sellers immediately dislike the buyer. Like, these people are like not good human beings, right? Like, it is immediate, like, oh, they're greedy, they want this, like. Am I the only one that the sellers feel that way, or you get that, like, that conversation? Because you all are looking at me like, oh, my sellers don't do that. Maybe I work with the wrong people, but, like, it's like a you against me thing, right? That's why we're hired. When we're going back to value, is making sure the emotion that that seller is feeling does not go from seller to agent, to the other agent, then to buyer, right? That's why we have these 2 people representing these other people. It's the block. And the moment you take the emotion in on that, and usually we put emotion in on it if we are banking on this thing closing. That is the one time I know for a fact you put emotion on this, right? Because you're like, oh, I can't let this fall apart. Because otherwise the mortgage isn't getting paid in June. We have to be unemotional on both sides. It needs to be factual, and it needs to be a process of giving them the information to make their own decision. Right? Because a lot of times it's like, you just sent over 15 things. That's ridiculous. Well, no, that agent didn't send that over. Their buyer wanted them to send that over. And you 2 are coming together to make sure that this gets to close. Can we agree with that? Has anyone ever been in a transaction where it didn't feel like that?
I'll just say on something that Derek brought up too, is don't wait till the last minute. Remember, time is always in someone's favor, and if you are sending if you're sending all your requests on the last day, especially if you do it at like 7 o'clock, unless you send a cancellation, that contract goes as written without those items. So it's not enough just to make your amendment to send. That the items, the seller could just not respond, which would make a ton of sense if something came. And then it's the obligation of the buyer to go forward with the original contract. Which, if that happens, imagine who they're ticked off at, because time is your responsibility as an agent, right? So.
Or you're at,
be
like, up at
careful.
11:30 PM being like, they haven't sent anything back. I should probably send a cancellation. And what does that look like to your buyers? Hey, could you guys get up for a quick second? Because we need to sign this cancellation, otherwise we're in, and everyone's stressed and they're all on pins and needles.
Amy, we do, Kami, Mrs. Seller, we do have an alternative. Also, I know what you're most stressed about is actually getting all this work done before closing in 25 days. So we've already talked to you about this is range of costs for this is between $6,000 and $7,000. We can go back and offer the buyer to, and I'll explain why, to cover $6,000 worth of their closing costs and let them do the work. Or you can say, hey, there's 4 out of these 10 items I'm willing to do. We'll give them $5,000 and we'll do these 4 items. The reason why we pay for the buyer's closing costs is because that actually will put the cash in their pocket to allow them to do the work once they move in. So that's an alternative. We can go back to them and either way, just be prepared though, that you may have to go all the way up to that $7,000 because now you're not doing the work, they are. And there's a lot of uncertainty with that.
Well, and to be fair, if you have a 30-day close, sometimes some of the things can't get done in 30 days, right? Like,
And get
I
leads.
mean, subcontractors are booked up, even if they're your vendor, they're still booked out. And you need to get the receipts and that it's proven to be done to title prior to closing. So really, it's not a 30-day close. You got like 2 weeks, right? To get it done, to get the receipts, to get it paid for. So knowing that piece of it and knowing what it would cost, which makes the transaction a little bit smoother for everyone, right? Is like, okay, now we can take care of it as a buyer.
Every year.
As a buyer,
Timing your factors too.
as a buyer, if you know that the seller has chosen not to take care of things that they maybe have known about or maybe haven't known about over the time that they've owned their house, do you want that person responsible for making corrections on your house for your family,
Ooh, Derek, say that again.
right? For your family?
No.
Of course, that's how I find it. I mean,
It's like I forgot what I said.
The best is buying, asking sellers to install carbon monoxide detectors, like, or smoke detectors. Like, why wouldn't you just replace them yourself so that you know it's done right? Or have your person do it.
I mean, I remember when it was like, oh, the handle's loose, like, fix the handle, make sure it's, I mean, there were things where I'm like, what? Why didn't you just have that done before? But, like,
I always recommend that my buyers ask for money instead of having a radon system put in, because you can put in some real ugly radon.
so that's the other piece, like, do we know how the craftsmanship is getting done, right? If it's a legit, like, contractor, because in that inspection addendum, what is the broker saying for, licensed, bonded, and insured? Like,
Yeah, so that's why it gets expensive, because on the buy side, you should be writing your amendments the best you can to protect your buyer, right? So you put licensed, bonded, insured electrician.
let me
licensed-
tell you, handyman Joe is not licensed, bonded, or insured.
That's right, so
Like-
that's where that piece gets expensive.
I don't think I think that was like the first 3 months that I was in real estate. That line has never went out of my brain, right? Like, it needs to be a licensed, bonded, and insured contractor doing the work.
Can I say one more thing that I would like to see us do less of, and I get it was because we were doing inspections but didn't really want to do it. I think it's poor of us as buyers agents to write on the front side, this is only for safety items or only for the knowledge or only whatever when we're writing that inspection. Because what's happening is people have different definitions of what may be a safety issue or whatever. Don't negotiate, if you're gonna do an inspection, my encouragement would be, don't negotiate the inspection before the inspection had been done. So say we're gonna do an inspection, keep your time period, and then come back for those things that you would then negotiate on, which I think is best for your client.
What else on the south side for inspection? What else do we do to mitigate risk?
One of the things I think helps with that spot of, hey, I'm gonna see this, and now I wanna cancel, we're not doing anything, we'll just cancel, is to recognize, if this transaction ends, another one's gonna happen and the items are not corrected. So the same issues we might have right now are gonna need to be corrected at some point.
This is a really good
Plus something
point.
else.
So if they cancel because of those items, what does the seller usually do? Anyways, some of them fix it anyways, and you're like, we just negotiated our way out of this contract. Yet now we're gonna fix these things, or they don't fix them and it comes up again, right? So how do we mitigate that portion? Because that's real, right? You get done with one inspection, the second inspection comes up. Not only does that come up, but now the inspector found some more things, right? So how do you work through that?
I think it's that conversation. Let's think about this logically. If we cancel on this, we're gonna have another buyer. That might be right away. That might be, 30 more days down the road, depending on what the market looks like. And an inspection's gonna come up. They might find the same things. They might find the same things plus other items. And we might be spending more money on time and mortgage and then other inspection items.
And
And
Go ahead.
if you go on MLS and you were active contingent upon inspection, and now you all of someone active again, think of all the things that fill in people's minds.
What's the first thing the buyer's agent before they write the offer say? Like, hey, what happened during the inspection? That's the first thing that comes out of any buyer's agent's mouth. And
And,
you're like, oh, you know, we just couldn't agree.
and our broker is also saying that even though you as a seller are not liable for disclosing these new material facts, apart from the few that you are liable for, which we already covered, we now that we are licensed realtors know these material facts about this home, these 8 things that came up. We are required by law to disclose this to every prospective buyer that comes through the home from now on. And that's something we talked about before, but now it's really coming to, it's coming to the light, and it's important before we move on, put it back on the market and resell it. Because when the agents do call on what happened in the inspection, we are required to disclose any material facts.
And it's material facts, not opinion facts. Like, oh yeah, they found a crack in the main line, but it's not that big. It's not really a big deal. Maybe or maybe not. You have to replace in the next 3 to 5 years, right? It's material facts, not your opinion as an agent. Like you have to, there's a crack in the main line, right? How big is it? Here's the photo. If you have the photo and are able to share that. It's not your opinion on the crack in the main line. Anything else in regards to the inspection? I mean, there's a lot that can happen during this time period. And if anything, it's about communication again. And it's about giving them the knowledge that they need to make a decision, right? Whether or not it's more inspections, whether or not it's, hey, sometimes we didn't even talk about, the seller will be like, I don't know if I trust that. Right? Does that ever happen where you're like, maybe it's the opinion of an inspector. Maybe it's the opinion of such and such. It can be. I mean, when structural stuff comes into play, I mean, there's usually multiple structural people that come in to say, I don't agree with this, or this is another option. Or one's like, this is going to be 50 grand because you have to do this, this, and this. Whereas another person has an option of 15,000, right? So, I mean, no vendors. Like this is the one, like the most important time to have a very solid vendor list of, chimney, structural engineer, HVAC, plumbing. I mean, you name it, landscaping, sprinkler systems, pool guys, like have a vendor list of that and talk to them often. So when the problem comes up and you're like Rick and you get the inspection and you call them, you can talk to them immediately and it's not a 3-day period for you to be able to get a hold of someone. Because then now you've put yourself in a situation where it's like, hey, we need to extend the inspection period because we don't have any of the information you need to make a solid decision. And that sometimes comes back on us if we don't have the relationships, right? If you two are texting about something while you're left during this team meeting, I'm gonna ask you guys.
One more thing I'll say is, we went to this broker.
All I see is Shane
This
laughing.
broker forum, Brady and I and Claire went this last week. And one of the things that, there are a lot of eyes on real estate agents right now. And one of the concerns that, they had a thing at the U of M, DOC is on it, is that, companies like ours put the agent at the center of the transaction. Like you are the clients, right? You're Keller Williams clients. We want to be in partnership with you. And we got to get back to the buyer and seller being at the heart of that transaction. So there are times where we may want to keep a transaction moving forward that shouldn't move forward. And it actually becomes the best interest of us, or considered best interest versus our clients. And we got to make sure as we're going through these things that we always think, what's the best for the client? What would I want in this spot? What the easy negotiation might be, you take a $15,000 hit. However, there might be a spot where if we took time, we could find something that might be better for that client. And I would just ask that everyone keep that hat on of, I'm the fiduciary of my client. What do I want? What's best for my client?
In addition, you guys, this is very, very complicated part of real estate. This should not be done alone. We've talked about this before. There's always going to be these 10-minute moments in real estate in which you need help, and it's going to either make or break a transaction. One is when an appraisal comes back low. What do? Another is when you get the inspection results from the inspector, and then you're working with the buyer, or you get something from the buyer's agent, you're working with the seller. At that time, reach out to the agent of the day, reach
Tutor
out
of the day, tutor of the day.
tutor of the day, or call Tony Sarempa, call Scott Kopendrier, take these names down. And ask them, because they've been doing this for a very, very long time, and they'll be able to help you walk through it, so.
And it becomes really fun when you're in a relationship with people, when their best interest is in mind. It becomes really fun, because then when you go to the closing table, that's a fun moment in the transaction. If you're not in a relationship with them and you made decisions for them, or you thought you made decisions that were best for them, those are the ones where people show up to those closings and you can tell. You can tell, they look at their agent and they're like, I'm like, yeah, oh, we made it through it, great. And they don't even talk, right? But when you ask them and you educate them, it becomes a lifelong client. Every single time. I don't think I've ever had one where I'm in complete relationship with them and their best interest in mind, where it hasn't been a client for life and referrals have come in. When that doesn't happen, that's when it gets really dicey and you're like, I don't want to call them for a referral. Well, obviously you don't, because you didn't do your job, or you didn't do your job well. So when you have that feeling, think about that. Why don't I want to call them? And it's going to come back probably to you and how you dealt with the transaction. And did you mitigate the risk for them? If not, learn how to do that, right? Moving forward, because it's going to be crucial. It's going to be crucial in this market. Colleen.
One of the things that Derek talked about were the stages of grief for the seller. And when people are going through that, sometimes I ask them to kind of back up and think about themselves as a buyer. Like when you're a buyer, you're afraid that everything is terrible, the whole house is gonna fall in, you're gonna be in a bad position. And do you remember the last time you bought? How did you feel? And just emotionally talk them through that, which I think is exactly what you were just saying, the communication. But sometimes to help people step out of their emotion and try to look at it from another point of view really helps.
Well, let's be honest, how many times are people at the top of their budget? So then they go into the inspection and they're like, well, if I have to pay for all this stuff, I'm not gonna be able to buy furniture for this 5,000 square foot house. If that's the conversation that they're having, let's go back, right? And be like, okay, so what's the motivation, right? Like if we are at the top of our budget, let's talk about if something would happen in your life. Is this where you want to financially be? And don't be afraid of that conversation. I mean, that's real. People say that, right? They're like, well, I'm not going to have money to buy a couch. Okay, well, what are the other options, right? Because maybe we needed to talk about like, hey, this is what furnishing this house costs. Or be really open to waiting 2 more years to buy furniture. All right, wants and needs, and then we're going to get to.
See, I just have, interesting. I saw a few hands not go up for CE credits. There's a class in the CE shop. I don't know if you use that, but I just took this on inspections. It's actually a really, really good class. So if you're looking for something for 3 hours, go on CE shop and take the, I can't remember what it's called, primary inspection issues or something like that. Good class.
Or it'd be interesting, and I've never done this, but have you ever talked to your inspector on like, how do you approach an inspection and what does that look like, right? I mean, I've never fully been, well, I shouldn't say that. I went through walkthroughs, right, with inspectors before, but I've never been there for a full 4-hour inspection on a home. In 14 years that I've been in the business, like I've never actually done that, right? But as an agent, what would that look like if you could actually understand what they're doing and how they're doing it? And, you know, does it bottom up? Is it, you know, do they do the outside first? Like maybe ask your vendor and say, hey, walk me through this to get a better understanding of what actually goes on.
Maureen has her hand raised.
Maureen.
So I was just going to share that I'm in the middle of a transaction right now where we just lifted the inspection contingency. And so I reached out to the lender on the buyer side and let her know and wanted to follow up again about the written statement due date. And I found out that the buyer's agent never contacted the lender, never sent the PA over to the lender. It's a relocation client. And so they don't think they're going to be able to have the written statement in time. And she and I were on the phone for a long time, but I just want to stress that like this was the buyer's lender, not my client's lender. And she was thanking me for how much I've been in communication with her. I'm the one who sent the purchase agreement over to her this morning. And then I've had to follow up with the buyer's agent and kind of almost help her do her job. And it's just
Her job. I love that.
Think and do it.
yeah. So it's just, I know, it's just so important to just keep the lines of communication open. Like I know it's in my best interest for my clients that we go to the closing table. So I'm just making sure I'm staying in contact with everyone on all sides. And I just couldn't believe that the buyer's agent kind of dropped the ball on this one. So.
Happens more than you think. For sure. All right, wants and needs. What do we got? New listings, buyers. Also, before in case you start heading out, always send wants and needs to Lydia. She sends out the email at the end of the day. It needs to include address, location, beds, bath, and price point. Wendy.
Maddie has a buyer looking for a house, 4 beds, 3 baths, preferably 3-car garage and a nice backyard, open concept, Eden Prairie, 650 or less. So if you have anything that looks like that, we'd love to hear about it. And we have a new listing coming on in Eden Prairie. It's 5.4 mega square feet and 3-car garage, about 900, 925.
So I have one also coming on in Eden Prairie.
Ooh.
Just 2-story. It's like a, 6-bedroom, 5-bath, 950.
Right down the street from
25,
Wendy.
950, and probably a better location. That's awesome. Yeah, there's 2 of them in Eden Prairie and then others. That'll be nice. Available now.
Who's got a buyer for Eden Prairie? What else you got?
Go walk around there and find a buyer.
So that's actually another option, for sure.
Yeah, I'm door knocking next week. So.
Lydia.
Today.
Out to the barbecue again, down, out to the side, brats and hot dogs on by profile.
Nice brat.